The conflict between Hamas and Israel is only getting worse. More bombs, more missiles, more casualties on both sides. Around the world, we're seeing a disturbing amount of anti-Semitic incidents from Europe to North America. In today's video, we cover the shocking amount of calls to violence against Jews worldwide, the media's biased coverage, and the reason why it's becoming increasingly clear that Israel must exist. Before we get to the worldwide anti-Semitism, let's talk about the media real quick because their coverage has been anything but true or fair. Last week, the Israeli Defense Forces put out a statement that they were going to go into Gaza with ground troops, a ground invasion. Consequently, all the news outlets, CNN, AP News, reported that Israel was going into Gaza with a ground invasion. The Hamas militia, thinking that Israel was going into Gaza, went into their underground tunnels. Israel knew they would do this. So what did they do? No ground invasion. That was never the plan. They went with an airstrike and collapsed the tunnels with the Hamas militia members inside. A fantastic move. No civilians were hurt. You would imagine the media loved it, right? No. Wrong. CNN's favorite talking thumb, Brian Stelter, is actually quite upset about it. In the next clip I'm going to show you, he condemns the Israeli Defense Forces for lying to the media. And then asks, what are you going to do to win my trust back? Now, I understand that some of you may not want to watch a clip of Brian Stelter, but this one's special because at one point, he even says the truth. Check it out.
I wonder, broadly speaking, if you feel like Israel's losing the media war, losing the media or losing the propaganda war right now.
Let me tell you this. I think that Hamas is getting a free ride. And I'll give you an example. Most of the international outlets, they rely on figures for casualties in Gaza based on one single source, the Gaza Health Ministry. Guess who runs the Gaza Health Ministry? Hamas does. Hamas has an interest in enlarging the amount of non-combatants, women, children, etc., allegedly killed in combat, while they have an inherent interest in making all of those 20 to 30-year-old men who are part of their fighting force disappear out of their lists. And I think that's a very convenient strategy. And I think that too many people, too many news outlets are taking their word for granted, and they're making us go through very hard scrutiny. And I think it should be the other way around, actually.
There are questions about your credibility. Let's put back up on screen those examples. These headlines from the past 48 hours about what happened when spokespeople for the IDF said that it was a ground invasion, that an invasion of Gaza was happening. Then the story changed. There was no such invasion. You can see there the headline, Israeli military accused of using the media to trick Hamas. What happened, Lieutenant Colonel?
You used the term which I'm about to use. You said it, fog of war. It's human to make mistakes. We make mistakes, and as soon as we understood that a mistake was made, I corrected it, and we're moving on.
You're moving on, but I think many journalists are very suspicious of what happened. They feel like they were tricked. They feel like they were used. How are you going to regain trust, rebuild trust?
Brian is right. Israel lied. Brian is shocked because Israel usually gives up the element of surprise in order to save civilian lives. This time, no civilian lives were in danger, therefore Israel lied, and therefore Brian is shocked. Brian also asks, how are you going to gain the trust of the media back, you big, mean, bad Israel? Brian, how are you going to trust what a terrorist organization says and then turn around and question the integrity of Israel? Are you crazy? Is there no room for a brain inside of that thumb of yours? Philip DeFranco, a very popular YouTuber, was doing a segment on what's going on in Israel. In it, he was defending the moral superiority of Hamas. He went on a rant saying how One side targets civilian buildings. One side targets buildings in which media organizations are housed. Which side do you think he's talking about? If your answer is Hamas, then you are wrong. He's talking about Israel. Yes, Israel. So, Philip, let me ask the same question I asked Brian. Are you out of your damn mind? As of the recording of this video in the last week, 3,000 missiles, over 3,000 missiles have been fired into Israel from Gaza by Hamas terrorists. The only reason why you're not complaining about it is because the Iron Dome, the Israel defense system, is so strong. But death tolls, casualties, that's not the whole story. You have Hamas sending missiles to exclusively civilian populations. Israel should and must do everything to stop those missiles from crossing the border. Here's the clip of Phil DeFranco blaming Israel and claiming Hamas has moral superiority.
There are a lot of legitimate reasons to be disgusted by and criticize the Israeli government. Because while I think there are certain avenues here, I mean, people like John Oliver had said this, certain areas that you can kind of both sides this thing, you can't do that with the whole situation. One side has killed significantly more civilians and children. One side specifically targeted a building that housed news organizations, Al Jazeera, the Associated Press, and...
If the Associated Press didn't want to be bombed, maybe they shouldn't be sharing a building with a terrorist organization. But that's just my soulless opinion. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments down below. Now, do you want one more example of media bias? Okay, I know you do. This time, again, coming from YouTube. The Hill, Rising. This show, I actually like it. Sagar and Teddy. I like and I agree with most of what he says. But today, we disagree. Well, we disagree with his co-host, Ryan Grimm, who, I'm shocked they said this, but they acknowledge Hamas as a legitimate government instead of a terrorist organization, which is what they are, a terrorist organization. Check it out.
And the argument that Hamas may have had an office inside of it, like you said, isn't a justification to begin with, according to Ari Fleischer. Then it turns out on top of that there's no evidence presented yet. AP says they have no evidence whatsoever that Hamas was operating out of that apartment building. Israelis haven't presented any evidence yet. But even if they do, then it goes back to the question: well, so what? You know, Hamas is the government in Gaza. They're probably going to be in a lot of buildings. Does that mean you can blow up every building? Well, according to the George W. Bush administration, it doesn't.
I think we've all had enough of the talking heads, and it's time to explore anti-Semitism worldwide. Let's begin with the protest in Belgium. At the beginning of the video, I showed you the footage of the protest, but do you know what they were chanting? Could it be for a ceasefire, for peace for everybody, to expel Hamas and truly free the Palestinians from the Hamas oppression? No. They were chanting for the death of Jews, obviously. Come on, get with the program. The UK also had its protest. For me, the highlight was a caravan driving through London with Palestinian flags, yelling for Jewish women to be killed and sexually assaulted. You decide which side you're on.
Stop the movement, stop all of them, stop the mothers, stop the daughters, and show the support for Palestine. Shut them out, rape the daughters, we have to send a message.
Across Canada, multiple Jews were assaulted by pro-Palestine supporters and protesters from Toronto to Montreal. Of course, we've seen the violence here in America as well, as I showed you in previous videos in New York and Florida, so I'm not going to show it to you in this video, and it's getting kind of long also. Now, before I leave, I want to show you some headlines and some tweets that I found fascinating. Starting with the Washington Post. Jeff Bezos. Israel's Iron Dome defense system protects Israeli lives. It also perpetuates the Israeli-Gaza conflict. The system has saved lives on both sides of the border, but leaves little incentive for a political solution. In this story, the Washington Post argues for Israel to stop using the Iron Dome, which has saved countless lives. Nice. Good for you, Washington Post. This one comes from Vox, and also, let's not be CNN, full disclosure, this one's from 2014, but it's quite relevant. Yes, Gaza militants hide rockets in schools, but Israel doesn't have to bomb them. No, Israel doesn't have to bomb them, it's true. Israel could go over there, part their hair, caress them a little bit, give them a little kiss on the forehead, and nicely ask, Hamas, please stop shooting missiles. Thank you. Now, the last tweet I want to show you comes from Edward Snowden. I respect, but we can't agree with everybody on everything. Edward Snowden. Israel just intentionally destroyed press offices in Gaza, given only 1 hour's warning. Only 1 hour? It sounds like plenty of warning to get out. Associated Press president horrified that the Israeli military would target and destroy news organizations in Gaza. Imagine this was your home. The news organization is housed next door in the same building as a terrorist organization. At that point, that one's on you, boo-boo. Sorry. I think it's become quite clear for you, for me, for anyone who's really watching with their eyes open, why Israel's existence is so essential and why it must exist. Jews are being attacked around the world, even in America. What do you think would happen if Israel wasn't there to protect the interests of Jews? I think we would have been persecuted long, long ago. A Holocaust? Maybe. Hopefully not. Hopefully we'll never find out. Now, another thing is, there are over 40 Islamic countries in the world. And there's only one Jewish one. And it shall remain. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, share. That's what really helps the channel. See you next time.